I'm beginning this review with my recall of history leading up to Consciousness Explained and beyond. I start with Descartes declaring everything to be purely physical, except for human consciousness, which alone was of a nature independent of everything else. In an 1874 essay titled On the Hypothesis that Animals Are Automata and Its History, Thomas Huxley made the same distinction, but made this colourful metaphor in addition. The consciousness of brutes would appear to be related to the mechanism of their body simply as a collateral product of its working, and to be as completely without any power of modifying that working as the steam whistle which accompanies the work of a locomotive engine is without influence upon its machinery. Clearly, he was referring to brutes, but his steam whistle analogy often got quoted in support of epiphenomenalism, that consciousness in general, including ours, is like that steam whistle. That is, while what's physical, like our bodies, can generate consciousness, consciousness can't act back on our bodies to tell them what to do. For me, this was not a mere hypothesis throughout my 20s. This was how I experienced myself. This was in the mid-20th century, the heyday of behaviorism. Quote, "The behaviorist methodological program has been of revolutionary importance to the program of psychology, but more, it has been one of the main sources of the philosophical suspicion that the two-world story, mind distinct from matter, is a myth." So wrote Gilbert Ryle in his 1940 book, The Concept of Mind. In it, he likened consciousness to a ghost in the machine being the physical body, primarily the brain, mind being nothing more than a ghost, something not real, purely a figment of folk imagination. Dennett studied under Ryle and in 1965 issued a doctoral dissertation, The Mind and the Brain, Introspective Description in the Light of Neurological Findings, Intentionality. From the abstract, recent attempts to describe the relation between the mental and the physical have met with difficulties because the supposed mental entities and events met with an introspection seem to have capacities and qualities entirely unlike those of physical events and entities. I'll repeat that. The supposed mental events and entities met with in introspection, consciousness, seem to have capacities and qualities entirely unlike those of physical events and entities. He referred to these as difficulties. The way out of these difficulties is to follow the method of particle physics. Introspective reports are treated with a particular blend of caution and sympathy. His method: cerebral mechanisms are described that could produce introspective reports in all their differentiations. No room is left for non-physical events or entities, since the physical account of the production of the introspective reports is held to be complete. Here, from Wikipedia, quote, "Dennett is a proponent of materialism in the philosophy of mind. He argues that mental states, including consciousness, are entirely the result of physical processes in the brain. In his book, Consciousness Explained, Dennett presents his arguments for a materialist understanding of consciousness, rejecting Cartesian dualism in favor of a physicalist perspective." Dennett's Consciousness Explained was published in 1991. Just 3 years later, David Chalmers came out with his distinction between the hard and easy problems in accounting for consciousness. Again, from Wikipedia, quote, "The hard problem of consciousness is the philosophical challenge of explaining how and why physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experiences, qualia, or what it's like to have a feeling. It contrasts with the easy problems of explaining how the brain functions and processes information," end of quote. With this distinction, attention would shift to what Chalmers called the hard problem, accounting for qualia, subjective experiences, consigning Dennett's concerns in Consciousness Explained to being about the easy problems, the neurological basis of our mental abilities. Appreciating that we come to Dennett's book with this new sensibility helped me with my reading of it. I found Dennett trying to account for the hard problems, qualia, and actually experiencing, in terms of methods for tackling the easy problems. Remember this from his dissertation abstract: "The supposed mental events and entities met with in introspection seem to have capacities and qualities entirely unlike those of physical events." His solution: cerebral mechanisms are described that could produce introspective reports in all their differentiations. No room is left for non-physical events or entities, since the physical account of the production of the introspective reports is held to be complete. In Consciousness Explained, Dennett sets out to explain away in particular two aspects of the hard problem of consciousness: our experience of having a conscious self and qualia, sensations. Our conscious self he mocks as a Cartesian theatre, a tiny theatre inside our heads where the conscious self learns about the outside world via a screen onto which our senses project their impressions. He subscribes to a common argument against this concept, that this tiny self will have to have its own even tinier theatre to read the images on the screen, and so on ad infinitum. In its place, he comes up with a model dissolving the unity of the conscious self into a parliament of separate mental facilities that among themselves compete to be in charge in each instant. About the Cartesian theatre metaphor, I'm not persuaded by his dismissal of it. Remember the blind men feeling various parts of the elephant and disagreeing on its nature? Now imagine them modeling their impressions next to one another on a tabletop in plasticine at 1/20th scale. By then running their hands over the combined model, they could then know the complete elephant. So our senses may report in terms the conscious self can appreciate. The Cartesian theatre is upheld. I don't recommend reading Dennett's book. Chalmers' raising of the hard problem makes it read like a work from the past age. Its arguing is tortuous and fails to reach any conclusions. It reads as if the author, having thought about the subject for several decades, has dumped into his manuscript every concern about it he ever had. It's packed with thoughts following one another in a torrent, but none establishing the points he wants to make. Here they are, he seems to be saying. Now see what you can make of them. I found his writing enlightening primarily for how it suggested he experienced consciousness. The mind is nothing but a physical phenomenon. In short, the mind is the brain. Essentially, he's a functionalist. My conclusion was he experienced consciousness as physicalists do, that is, barely at all. I think this needs some attention. I suggest physicalists like Dennett experience themselves as purely physical creatures with senses such as you might equip a computer with, but no experience of trains of thought leading to decisions they then consciously apply in physical action. As backup for this, I refer you to a survey I'm running in this channel. You can find it in this channel's community tab. It offers visitors 4 self-describing options to choose from. Here are 2 of them. Dualist option. Do you experience your own thinking, arriving at decisions step by step, and then carrying them out? Dualism. Physicalist option. Are you unaware of thinking and sometimes don't know why you did what you did? Responses are running 4-1 in favor of the first option, dualism. The greater popularity of dualism involving concern with mind is widely acknowledged, as confirmed by this response. So how can Dennett write, materialism of one sort or another is now a received opinion approaching unanimity? Of course, he's referring to academics like him within university STEM departments who get to publish opinions on the matter, who are, for some reason, self-selection, predominantly physicalists. Dennett shares their opinions, and I assume their lack of awareness of their own thinking processes, as my survey visits concede. This upsets me. So-called experts airily dismiss as folk psychology how the majority of us experience consciousness and refer to their own accounts as the consensus. No, their reports are not the consensus. I call on fellow dualists to set this record straight. I end with some extracts from Consciousness Explained. In a thumbnail sketch, here is my theory so far. There is no single definitive stream of consciousness, because there is no central headquarters, no Cartesian theatre where it all comes together for the perusal of our self. Instead of such a single stream, however wide, there are multiple channels in which specialist circuits try, in parallel pandemoniums, to do their various things, creating multiple drafts as they go. Qualia have been replaced by complex dispositional states of the brain, and the self turns out to be a valuable abstraction, a theorist's fiction rather than an internal observer or boss. In the chapters that follow, I will explain the various phenomena that compose what we call consciousness, showing how they are all physical effects of the brain's activities. The prevailing wisdom, variously expressed and argued for, is materialism. There is only one sort of stuff, namely matter, the practical stuff of physics, chemistry, and physiology. And the mind is somehow nothing but a physical phenomenon. In short, the mind is the brain. You are not authoritative about what is happening in you, but only about what seems to be happening in you. Our conviction that we are somehow directly acquainted with special properties or features in our experience is one of the most powerful intuitions confronting anyone trying to develop a good theory of consciousness. I've been chipping away at it, trying to undermine its authority. Notice that it presupposes something we have worked hard to escape, the assumption that consciousness is a special all-or-nothing property that sunders the universe into 2 vastly different categories: the things that have it, mind, and the things that lack it, matter. The sort of difference that people imagine there to be between any machine and any human experience is one I am firmly denying. There is no such sort of difference. There just seems to be. The idea of mind as distinct in this way from the brain, composed not of ordinary matter but of some other special kind of stuff, is dualism, and is deservedly in disrepute today, given the way dualism in all its forms is false or incoherent. Accepting dualism is giving up. There is another way to address the possibility of zombies, and in some regard, I think it is more satisfying. Are zombies possible? They are not just possible, they're actual. We are all zombies.